Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I'd like to express my sincere gratitude on behalf of my Minister and the G7 Plus Secretariat to Marcus for inviting me to come here to share with you some of perspectives of the fragile states on the so-called new deal for international engagement in fragile states. I've prepared a few slides for you to be able to follow, especially coming from Timor-Leste, a country which hosts official language is Portuguese, English is the fourth language, so it's a bit of a mixture, but I hope that within this less than 10 minutes I should be able to give you a gist of what this G7 Plus perspectives on the new deal for international engagement in fragile states. As mentioned by Andy early on, I just came back from representing the fragile states in the Working Party on Aid Effectiveness in the preparation for a Busan High-Level Forum. We had a very interesting two-day discussion in Paris, which I'm happy to share with you what the outcome will be in a few minutes. But set the context. As you all know, that approximately 1.5 billion people live in conflict-affected and fragile states. In fact, studies say that these countries are lagging behind in terms of achieving the MDGs. Well, if you look at the MDGs, it's only 3 years down the track. Unfortunately, no fragile state will achieve a single MDG by 2015. New targets are needed for the unique challenges faced by fragile states. On top of that, because UK is one of the big donors in fragile states, together with other development partners, and there is about 30% of ODA spent in this context, and we're yet to see the results. And in fact, many of you who are involved perhaps on the dark 10 principles for good international engagement in fragile states and situations, the results after the 2009 and 2011 surveys, the two-round surveys that was conducted in different countries, including my own country, the results are mixed. So business as usual in fragile states is no longer an option. So there is a need, or it's imperative, to call for a different way of approaching this. Last week, I had the honor to be involved in the panel discussion in terms of launching the report, Can We Do Better in Fragile States? I mentioned this, that we, the fragile states, we are not asking for you to change your behavior. All we are asking you is that you support, your understanding, your political will to change the way we do business in fragile states. Right, as Andy mentioned also, for years we only talk about fragile states from the lens of development partners, not from the lens from the fragile states. I believe that for the first time in history that the international dialogue under the current leadership of Minister Pires from Timor-Leste and Koen Davidsen from the Netherlands, that they provided a forum to shift the paradigm in fragile states. And now we are able to come together under that umbrella to talk about how best we can help the fragile states, turning the monologue into the dialogue, into an equal footing. So again, we are trying our best to exhibit ownership and leadership by fragile states, and hopefully we can also expect for the best out of this. So never before have fragile and conflict-affected countries have an equal voice, and that's a fact. In fact, the World Bank has their own fragile states units, DFID also has, other countries also have different units with a goodwill, good intention in order to help the fragile states. But from the recipient side, we never had the forum to sit down this together, talk among ourselves. So we are now organizing ourselves, and I'm glad to report to you that the G7 Plus is taking the momentum in terms of taking the ownership of shared challenges in leading in shared solutions as well. So, under the international dialogue, where the G7 Plus, we now have 17 countries, ranging from Papua New Guinea, Solomon Islands. In Asia, we have Timor-Leste, Afghanistan, and Nepal. In Africa, we have the majority, with the likes of DRC, Chad, Burundi, Central African Republic, Liberia, Somalia, Ivory Coast, and in the Caribbean we have Haiti. And the latest addition after Juba, mind you, we will have a country called Guinea-Conakry. And another country also wanted to join us is Zimbabwe. So here we go. Fragile states are getting together and talking to each other. We want to move out from fragility to stability and to development, whereas other countries want to join us. You know? So it's kind of like ironic, you know. And that's why when we present something, some people say we want to join fragile states. No, you have to help us to move out from fragile states, not joining us. You know? Right. So here's the New Deal. The New Deal is based on. I'm going to give you the 3 buzz keywords. Yeah. One is called PSG, and not Paris Saint-Germain. Yeah. Peace building, state building goals based on what has been agreed in Monrovia. If you go to the website of International Dialogue, you will see the Monrovia roadmap on peace building, state building, and for reasons of convenience, I just shortened it out to PSG. We have 5 goals or objectives in that. One is the legitimate politics, or inclusive politics, we call a state for all. And then we also have the citizen security. And the third one is justice for all. The fourth one is jobs for all. And the fifth one is how to manage your resources and to serve your own people. So these 5 objectives was launched in Monrovia with the presence of the new Nobel Peace Prize winner, Madam Ellen Sirleaf Johnson. Last week I mentioned this to the Working Party. Guess what? In terms of Peace Prize winners, we now, the G7 Plus, have the most winners per capita, you know, because we have Timor-Leste winning in 1986, now Liberia. But I think peace remains a challenging issue for us in fragile states. So we expect more winners, you know, maybe Afghanistan one day or someone else. Right. Okay, so my starting point is this, that because many countries are not are going to reach the MDG targets by 2015, so we fragile states, we will use these 5 objectives of the Monrovia, which we call PSG, as complementary to MDG. Because when MDG was designed back in 2000 or 2001 in New York, when they launched its millennium, I think conflict and fragility was not factored into that. The world has changed, you know, time has changed. So I think with the leadership of key countries of fragile states come together, identify, and going through this process with the involvement of our colleagues from civil society organizations and our international development partners, we identify this. This is something that we need to be taken into account. It is something endogenous, something coming from the fragile states themselves to identify this. So I can assure you that what is next, I'll tell you in a minute. So here we go. This is where the New Deal component is all about. We talk about focus and trust. They are the 2 key buzzwords. Focus means the fragility spectrum. We will develop our own fragility assessment, because so far the fragility assessment is being done by external organizations. With the likes of the World Bank, they do the CPIA, and other independent organizations, they do this. You know, when we put together mapping out these fragility, and for the World Bank, you can't go higher than 3.5. You know, below that, you're still, no matter what, you still have, you are still categorized fragile states. So we think, hang on. If you believe in us that we are the partner countries who are doing this, then let's do our own fragility spectrum. And we are about to do this next week. And Timor-Leste and Liberia are leading this process. And we're going to present fragility spectrum in Juba next week at the ministerial retreat, where our colleagues from South Sudan are hosting this event next week on the 18th and 19th of October. The second component means one plan, country-owned, and led by country themselves. So we will use one plan, country-owned, and then hopefully development partners intervention in those particular countries. We use hopefully one single plan. Of course, in reality, no one is going to use a single country plan, but you use the partner countries' development priorities plan for us to be able to do our intervention. The C stands for country compacts. We will use the country compacts as a vehicle for us, you development partners, and us, the fragile states, to implement this. And use the Paris, peace building, state building goals in order to assess the fragility, build peace and peaceful and stable societies, and then support inclusive political dialogue. So we try to make sure that no inclusive political dialogue go unfunded post 2012. Having said focus, then where is the trust? I remember my minister one day when she chaired a meeting with development partners. She talked about trust, and then she turned around to one particular development partner. I don't want to mention the name. She said, "Do you really trust me?" And then the development person, no, we don't trust you. Not you, but in your treasury system, in your procurement system, and so on. You know? So we are inspired by the so-called trust here. And then we sort of hang on. In the context of fragile states, how can we increase that trust? By using the transparency issue. It means that we have to be able to publish what you give us and what we do in terms of through our budget system or through our portal, so that you increase stability. And also risk sharing. You know. So far, I have to tell you, and of course you know already, that development partners are are risk averse. They are not risk taking, no risk tolerant. So what we are asking you now is that in the New Deal, what can you do? Let's join together, sit down in our ministry together, rather than you sit in a parallel unit somewhere else. Sit down with us and then assess together what sort of risk that we can do, what are the ways to mitigate them. And use a country system. The Paris Declaration survey, the Fragile States Principle survey, they all point to this use country system. No particular development partners is using country system in any country. They keep saying this, but they say they revert back to their own procurement system. You know? So from now on, it's a high time for us, if not using the country system, incrementally use the country system. And that's what this new deal in Busan, one of our particular country will announce that they are prepared to use the country system in one of the fragile states. And strengthen capacity. The key issue here is that do no harm. Rather than you setting up the parallel implementation unit of different projects. Why don't, if you want to use the capacity development technical assistance, for example, use the particular, for example, in my ministry under the leadership of my Minister Pires, no capacity development technical assistance goes funded in parallel session. It has to go through these technical assistant people have to report back to the minister. That's what the way it goes. In that way, we will ensure that we will make use of the one is best value for money, and the other one is the results that we really want to achieve. And the last thing means time, fast and predictable aid. Let me share with you an interesting thing from Timor-Leste. When we prepared, from my unit, we prepared the so-called development partners assistance for the next 3 years. There was some kind of like skepticism from certain key development partners. I wonder what this exercise is all about. But we are simply honoring the Accra Agenda for Action. One of the points of the Accra Agenda for Action says that donors will pledge to the partner countries the predictable aid for the medium 3 to 5 years. And that's one, in essence, that's the gist. So we did an exercise, from 2008 to 2011, what the donor will provide to us. So the moment we mentioned that there are some donors who provide this, and one particular donor, the column is empty, in front of the president, in front of the prime minister, they say that, Prime Minister, my country's column is empty there because we are precluded by our Congress not to say anything until we have a green light. So again, now the fault, whose fault is this if you can't provide us with predictable aid in fragile states? So that's just to give you an illustration that it is quite dilemmatic for you. We understand that, but for us, we need transparency. We need some kind of like forward planning from your side so that together we can all budget for the better delivery of service to our people. Let me just give you a quick, I know that my time is up, roadmap on Busan. And back in 2002, when development partners talk in Monterey, and then moving to Rome, moving to Paris. But again, these all are donors driven, right? That's a fact, back until 2005. Then came to Accra Agenda for Action in 2008. Then in the interim period, we had the Dili Declaration, I mean the international dialogue held in Dili, where we came up with the Dili Declaration. And then our colleagues in Colombia also came up with South-South cooperation under the Bogota statement. And now we all are now fighting towards going to Busan. So what happens in Busan? But before going to Busan, let me just quickly outline you what the G7 Plus and the members of the international dialogue are expecting for. As I mentioned in this document, we have the Monrovia roadmap, which we met in Monrovia. We identified those 5 PSGs in June. And now, from the G7 Plus side, we are going to have a ministerial retreat in Juba, where up to today we have 13, 14 countries already confirmed at the ministerial level and the director level. Then, from then on, we will be going to Busan, during which we will be discussing our new deal from the G7 Plus perspective and feed it back to the international dialogue. And then beyond Busan, we hope that we will be able to identify a few countries which are the first movers in terms of implementing the new deal post-Busan. Coming out freshly from the Working Party on Aid Effectiveness last week, here is the proposed agenda, the format for Busan. The Working Parties asked us, all the countries around the region, the middle-income countries, the low-income countries, the fragile states, and all different stakeholders representing different groups of countries. So, fragile states, we were asked to propose a building block. What this building block? Building block for us is a new deal for international engagement in fragile states. Given the fact that the evidence base has revealed that there is a sobering facts, sobering results, we need to have a different way of doing business in fragile state. I'm happy to report to you that we are pleased to see the plenary too on the 30th of November. You see the third part is the fragile states. We have a plenary session at the high-level forum in Busan, during which we propose that the 2 co-chairing countries, Timor-Leste on behalf of the G7 Plus and Netherlands on behalf of the development partners, will announce this new deal to the world in the presence of some other development partners with the likes of Australia, hopefully the US, and hopefully the UK. And from the fragile states side, we hope to pick Afghanistan, South Sudan, and Liberia and DRC. Unfortunately, they are now undergoing some elections in the next few months. So we're not sure whether the minister will be there, as elections normally happen. We are going to discuss this in Juba next week on what is the details of that. But what happens is the most important one, ladies and gentlemen, is this: that beyond Busan, we will seek the high-level political endorsement in Busan, and then trying to implement this new deal with the appropriate involvement of CSOs and our international development partners and within our organizations. We will also contribute to shape the MDG's agenda and ensure that its relevance for fragile states. Just final point, we also talk about the monitoring side of this new deal. What I mean by go light at the global level and heavy at the country level, this is what we need to do. Paris Declaration has shown us that it's a worth exercise, but the results are quite mixed. The same thing goes to the 10 principles for fragile states. The intention is good, but again, the results also are mixed by country. And the Global Monitoring Report has just been released in Brookings Institute last month, and so was last week in Paris. So at the moment, we're talking about we're investing more heavily in doing monitoring and doing a lot of joint exercise, joint implementation at the country level that matters to us. And we are talking also about the Global Partnership for Development Effectiveness. This is just still not well defined yet, but I just want to show this for you to be able to get the gist of how do we rationalize the working party at the DAC level is the only body who brings together all these multiple stakeholders from countries and organizations, and now they are bringing in as well with the likes of BRICS, Brazil, Russia, China, India, and South Africa. So now this is kind of like the future architect of post-Busan in terms of global partnership for development, moving from aid effectiveness towards development effectiveness. So this is the conversation. Now, way forward, as I said early on, we are going to try to implement those commitments in selected G7 plus countries. I said why I said selected G7 plus countries. Don't come to an illusion that G7 plus are a group of countries that are easy to do business with. You know how Somalia is like. You know how the Ivory Coast looks like. You know how Haiti is like. You know? People say that Timor-Leste and Liberia will be the strongest candidates to graduate, but I say hold on until we have our own election next year as well. So when we pass the election next year, without any violence, then I think we have a strong reason to say that after 10 years of peace and stability, after nationhood, we might be able to also join the club of a success story. And the final point is that all we ask is a political commitment from our leaders and also our development partners and our civil society, of course, your engagement as a watchdog, as someone who exercises peer review and peer pressure to the government and development partners is very much appreciated. So with that note, I end here, and then I'll be happy to take questions later on. Thank you.